The desert stretched endlessly, its sands glowing gold beneath the unforgiving sun. Heat waves shimmered on the horizon, where jagged mountains loomed like ancient guardians. A lone woman, weary and trembling, walked alongside a tall Apache warrior. Her pale dress was torn, her hair tangled by dust and wind. But what weighed her down most was not the desert's cruelty, it was the secret pressing against her heart. Her steps faltered. She clutched her stomach unconsciously, though it was not yet rounded enough to show. She swallowed, the taste of fear sharp on her tongue. Every beat of her heart whispered, "He must know. He must know." The Apache warrior noticed her hesitation. He slowed his stride, his dark eyes steady as he looked at her. He had rescued her weeks ago from raiders who would have left her to die. Since then, he had given her water, shared his food, and shielded her from the wild dangers of the desert. Yet she carried with her a burden heavier than the sun overhead. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she stopped. Her knees weakened, and she sank to the sand. Tears blurred her vision. She had rehearsed the words in her mind 100 times, but when her lips parted, they came out broken, trembling, and full of shame. "I'm with child," she whispered, her voice shaking like fragile glass. She dared not look at him, for fear of the storm she expected in his eyes. "But it isn't yours." Her chest heaved as the truth broke free. She wept, pressing her face into her hands. She thought of the soldier who had promised her love, who had whispered vows beneath the starlight months ago, only to abandon her when duty, or perhaps cowardice, called him away. She thought of the judgment she would face from others, of the rejection she was sure to meet even here, from a man she had come to trust more than she had ever intended. The desert was silent. Only the faint cry of a hawk overhead filled the air. She waited for anger, for disgust, for the sound of his boots walking away, leaving her broken and alone. But none came. When she finally dared to lift her gaze, she found him standing still as stone. His eyes, dark, deep, unyielding, were calm. Not cold, not condemning, but calm, as though her confession had not shaken him at all. He crouched down so his gaze met hers, the sun casting strong lines across his bronzed face. "You weep," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "But you have nothing to be ashamed of." Her lips trembled. She could not understand. You don't hate me?" The Apache warrior shook his head slowly. "A child is not a curse. It is life. It does not matter whose blood it carries. If you are under my protection, so is the child." Her breath caught in her throat. She had expected anger. Instead, she found strength she did not know she needed. The calm in his eyes told her more than words could, that he would not turn away, that his heart was not swayed by fear or pride. Her tears flowed harder, but this time they were not only tears of shame. They were tears of relief, of something dangerously close to hope. As the wind swept across the desert, the woman realized that perhaps the storm she feared had already passed. In its place was the steady, unshaken strength of a man whose love was not bound by blood, but by choice. And for the first time in many months, she felt the faint stirrings of peace. The desert night was unlike the day. Where the sun had beaten them with merciless heat, the darkness now cloaked the land in cool shadows. The woman sat by the small fire the Apache warrior had built, its orange glow flickering across her pale, tear-stained face. The confession of earlier still weighed heavily in her chest, but his calmness lingered in her mind like an echo she could not silence. She watched him from across the flames. He sat cross-legged, sharpening his knife with deliberate, steady strokes. The blade caught the firelight, sending sparks of silver into the night. There was no sign of unease in him, no trace of anger. That, more than anything, unsettled her. At last, she whispered, her voice breaking the silence. "Why? Why do you not despise me? Why do you not turn me away?" The Apache warrior lifted his gaze, his dark eyes reflecting both firelight and stars. For a long moment he said nothing, and she thought perhaps he hadn't understood her words. But then, in his quiet, measured tone, he answered, "You carry a life. That is sacred. To despise you would be to despise the child and the great. Spirit does not forgive a man who curses life itself." His words struck her like a prayer. Her hand moved unconsciously to her belly, though it was still flat. She felt a trembling within her chest, something fragile hope, perhaps, though she dared not name it. Still, she shook her head. "But the child? It belongs to another man. A man who left me. You owe me nothing. You owe it nothing." The warrior's gaze deepened, and he set the knife aside. Slowly, he leaned forward, his face lit by the soft glow of the fire. "I am Apache," he said firmly. "When I give my word, it is my blood, my honor. I do not turn from it. You are under my care. That means your child is under my care. No one, no man, no tribe, no hunger, no war will touch you while I breathe." Her breath hitched. She felt the ground shift beneath her heart, as if the world she had known was crumbling away, making room for something entirely new. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me? I am not one of your people." He studied her in silence for a moment, the crackle of the fire between them the only sound. Then he spoke with quiet conviction. "My people say a warrior's strength is not in how many enemies he strikes down, but in what he chooses to protect. You are alone. You have been wronged. That is enough. Your child will not be fatherless, not while I walk this earth." Her tears returned, though they were not born of despair this time. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth to keep the sob from escaping, but it broke free anyway, raw and honest. No man had ever spoken to her with such certainty, such steadiness. Even the one who had fathered her child had spoken with sweet promises, only to vanish when his words no longer served him. But this man, this Apache, spoke not with promises, but with an oath carved from stone. She leaned toward the fire, her voice unsteady. "And if your people, if your tribe rejects me because of this child, what then?" His jaw tightened, but his eyes never wavered. "Then I will stand against them. My oath is mine alone, and no one can take it from me." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark sky. The woman stared at him, her heart pounding wildly, as if it finally remembered what it meant to be alive. She saw in him not only a protector, but the faintest glimpse of something she thought she had lost forever: faith in love that was steadfast. Not fleeting. For the first time, she believed him. Truly believed him. And with that belief came a fragile, dangerous sense of safety. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Then perhaps I am not as lost as I thought." The Apache warrior inclined his head, his calm eyes reflecting hers. "No," he said simply. "You are not lost. You are found." The morning came softly, painting the desert sky in strokes of crimson and gold. The woman awoke to the smell of smoke and the faint crackle of fire. The Apache warrior was already awake, crouched near the embers, heating a strip of dried meat over the flames. He moved with quiet efficiency, as though the rising sun itself answered to his discipline. She sat up slowly, her body still sore from days of travel. For a moment, she simply watched him. His strength was not loud or boastful, it was in his patience, and the way he carried burdens without complaint. The memory of his words from the night before lingered, wrapping around her heart like a fragile shield, but as she touched her belly, her chest tightened. She could not let him believe she was without blame, that she was some helpless soul swept into tragedy. He deserved to know the truth, the whole truth. When he handed her the strip of meat, she accepted it but barely nibbled at the edges. Her eyes drifted downward, refusing his steady gaze. "There is more," she said finally, her voice hoarse. He tilted his head, waiting. She drew a shaky breath. The man who fathered this child, he was no stranger to me. I gave myself to him willingly. I believed his words, his promises of a future. He swore he would stand beside me, that I was the only one he loved. Her throat tightened. But when I told him I carried his child, he turned cold. He left me with nothing, not even a goodbye worth speaking. The words spilled out, hot and bitter, as though they had festered too long in silence. I was a fool. I trusted him. I wanted to believe love was enough to bind him to me. And now I bear the shame of that choice and the burden of this child. Her tears burned as they slid down her cheeks. She expected him to turn away now, to see her not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman too weak, too naive. She braced herself for his disappointment, but when she dared to glance at him, she found no scorn in his face. His eyes, as ever, were steady dark pools that seemed to hold the weight of ages. "You loved," he said at last, his voice calm, even. "There is no shame in that. The shame is his for breaking the bond he swore to you. The shame is his for leaving a woman to carry life alone." She blinked at him, stunned. "But I was foolish," he cut her off gently, shaking his head. "No, to open your heart is not foolishness. It is strength. Even when love is betrayed, it does not mean love itself is unworthy. What matters now is not the man who abandoned you, but the life you carry and the strength you still have." The woman covered her mouth, trying to hold back her sobs, but the dam broke. She cried not only for the betrayal, but for the strange relief of being told she was not ruined, that she was not beyond redemption. The Apache warrior moved closer. He did not touch her without permission, but his presence itself was solid, unshaken. "Among my people," he said quietly, "a child is never judged by the sins of its parents. It is a gift from the Great Spirit. This child will be no different." Her gaze lifted to his, searching his face for the smallest crack, the smallest hint of pity. But there was none. Only truth. Only calm. She whispered, broken but hopeful. "You speak as though you believe I can still be whole." He nodded once. "You are not broken. You are scarred, yes. But scars are proof you survived. They are not weakness, they are strength." The fire between them popped, scattering sparks into the morning air. And for the first time since the soldier's betrayal, she felt the crushing weight on her chest ease just slightly, but enough to breathe again. Perhaps, she thought, her past did not define her future. Perhaps this man, calm and true, could see something in her she could not yet see in herself. And for the first time in months, she dared to believe she was more than her mistakes. Sun had begun its slow climb when they continued their journey across the desert. The woman walked in silence, her thoughts tangled between shame and wonder. Each step was heavy, yet lighter than before. She had revealed her past, laid bare her wounds, and still the Apache warrior did not flinch. His calmness had unsettled her at first, but now it began to feel like an anchor in a world where everything else had drifted away. But a dangerous thought haunted her. What if he only speaks this way because he feels pity? She clenched her fists, bitterness curling in her chest. She could not bear the idea of being someone's burden. At last, she slowed her steps until she stood still. The Apache warrior paused ahead and turned, the desert wind tugging at the long strands of his dark hair. His gaze met hers, steady as ever. "You should not waste your strength by stopping," he said evenly. Her chest tightened. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I told you my secret because I wanted to drive you away. I thought if you knew the truth, you would cast me aside, and I could not blame you for it." Her voice cracked, and she lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I don't want your kindness if it comes from pity. I don't want to be your burden." The desert stilled around them. For a long moment he simply studied her, and she feared she had finally said too much. But then he walked back toward her, slow and deliberate, until he stood only a step away. His shadow stretched across her, shielding her from the sun. His voice was low but unyielding. "You think pity guides me? No. If I pitied you, I would have left you to your tears. Pity does not build fire at night. Pity does not walk beside you in the desert. Pity does not make oaths." Her breath caught. His eyes, fierce yet calm, held her still. "I do not stand with you because you are weak," he continued, his tone firm as stone. "I stand with you because I see strength in you, even when you do not. You spoke your truth though it cut you open. You carry life though your heart is broken. That is not weakness. That is a spirit stronger than you know." Her lips trembled. She had no words, only the pounding of her heart in her chest. The wind lifted her hair, tangling it across her face, but she barely noticed. "You are not my burden," he said, his voice softer now, but steady as ever. "You are my choice." The words struck deeper than any blade. Her knees weakened, and she pressed her hand against her mouth to hold back the sob that rose unbidden. For so long she had seen herself as ruined, cast aside, too broken to deserve loyalty. Yet here was a man who looked into her flaws and still saw worth. She turned away, wiping at her tears, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can believe that. I don't know if I can believe in myself anymore." The Apache warrior's calm never wavered. "Then believe in me. Until you can stand on your own again, lean on me. That is what it means to walk together." Something inside her broke, yet not with despair. It was as if a wall she had built to protect her heart had cracked, letting in a light she thought she had lost forever. She covered her face, sobbing softly, not from weakness, but from the fierce relief of not being alone. And though the desert was vast and merciless, in that moment she felt safer than she had in years. Days bled into nights and nights into days as they journeyed deeper into Apache lands. The woman grew accustomed to the rhythm of travel, his silent watchfulness, the brief rests under desert rock for shade, the small fires at night where the stars above seemed close enough to touch. But with every step closer to his people, a new fear began to gnaw at her heart. One evening, as the firelight flickered across their camp, she finally gave voice to the worry she had kept hidden. "When we reach your village, what then?" The Apache warrior, seated opposite her with his bow resting across his knees, lifted his gaze. "Then you will have shelter, food, safety." She shook her head, fingers twisting the hem of her dress. "And what of the child?" Her voice cracked. "It is not Apache. It is not yours. Will your people accept it? Will they accept me?" For the first time, his calm eyes softened into something almost like sorrow. He did not answer immediately, and that silence cut her deeper than words. She pressed on, her desperation spilling. "Your people may see me as a burden. They may see my child as a curse. I don't want to bring trouble to your tribe. If they cast me out, then I will go alone better than to bring shame to you." The warrior leaned forward, his voice low, carrying the weight of conviction. "You think too little of yourself. You think too little of them. A child is not a curse, no matter whose blood flows in its veins. It is a bridge." "A bridge?" She whispered, confused. He nodded, his eyes reflecting the fire. "A child born of two worlds carries both. In its breath is the song of two peoples. In its steps, two paths may one day walk as one. That is not a curse, that is hope." Her lips parted, stunned. "Hope, my child? You truly believe that?" "I do," he said simply, without hesitation. "Even if my people do not see it now, they will learn. And if they do not—" His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Then I will stand alone beside you. My oath does not bend to the will of others." Her heart trembled. Again and again his words were unshaken. He did not speak as men of her world had spoken, with sweet lies meant to comfort in the moment. He spoke with the weight of truth, even if it meant standing against his own blood. Her hand drifted to her stomach, her fingers pressing lightly against it. For so long she had feared this child would be nothing but a mark of her shame, a reminder of betrayal. Yet, in his eyes, it was something else entirely, something sacred. Her tears welled again, but this time they shone differently. She whispered, her voice breaking, "You make me see the child not as a burden, but as a gift." I never thought I could feel that way again. The Apache warrior inclined his head, his expression calm but resolute. "That is because it is truth. A child is always a gift. And this one will not walk alone." The fire popped between them, sending sparks swirling into the star-filled sky. She gazed at him through the haze of smoke and tears, and for the first time she let herself imagine a future where she was not defined by loss. A future where her child's laughter might echo between mountains and plains, a symbol of something greater than sorrow. And in that fragile imagining, a seed of hope took root inside her, a hope that maybe, just maybe, her child truly was meant to be the child of two worlds. The desert gave way to valleys of wild sage and mesquite, and the air grew cooler as the trail curved toward the Apache mountains. The woman walked beside the warrior, her steps lighter than before. Yet deep within her lingered a shadow, the voice of her own doubt, whispering that she was unworthy of the loyalty he so freely offered. That evening, they camped by a stream, its water glinting silver beneath the moonlight. She knelt to cup the cool water in her hands, watching the ripples scatter her reflection. The face that looked back was tired, hollow-eyed, marked by grief and shame. She sighed, her voice low. "You see strength in me," she murmured, "but I see only a woman who trusted too easily, who carries the proof of her mistakes in her womb." The Apache warrior's shadow fell across her. He crouched beside her, dipping his own hand into the water, letting it spill slowly through his fingers. His calm voice broke the stillness. "You call it a mistake. I do not. To love is never a mistake. To be betrayed is not your shame. It is his." She turned her face toward him, tears brimming. "But I feel ruined. What kind of woman am I now? What kind of mother will I be to a child born from lies?" For the first time, his expression shifted, not with anger, but with intensity, as though her words pierced something within him. He reached out, not to touch her, but to place his hand firmly against the earth between them. "In my people's way," he said slowly, "a woman is life-giver, sacred beyond measure. She is not judged by the wounds men carve upon her heart. She is judged by how she endures, how she rises. You have endured. You still walk. You still breathe. That is not ruin, that is strength." Her throat tightened. His conviction wrapped around her like a cloak, too heavy to shrug off. "Still," she whispered, "you speak as though I can be healed. But I don't know how." The warrior's eyes softened, his calmness like the steady flow of the stream. "Then let love heal you. Not the love that betrayed, but the love that chooses you despite the scars. The love that sees you as sacred still." Her breath caught, and for a moment she could not move. The way he looked at her, it was not the look of a man who pitied. It was the gaze of someone who saw worth in every fracture, who saw beauty where she only saw damage. She pressed her hand to her stomach, her tears slipping silently. "You would claim even me, broken as I am?" His voice was firm, true. "You are not broken. You are a woman with wounds. Yes, but wounds are not the end. They are the place where healing begins. And I will walk with you through that healing." Her sob escaped, soft and trembling, but this time it carried no despair. It carried release. For so long she had believed herself unworthy of gentleness, of devotion. Yet here was a man who spoke of her not as ruined, but as sacred. She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. "You don't know what this means to me," she whispered. The Apache warrior inclined his head slightly. his expression calm yet resolute. "I know enough. You need not be alone in your pain. I have chosen to carry it with you." The stream whispered beside them, the stars burning bright above. For the first time since her betrayal, she felt a strange warmth rise within her chest, a warmth not of shame, but of possibility. And though she did not yet have the words for it, she realized she was beginning to believe in love again, not the false promises of the past, but the steady, redemptive love of a man whose heart remained calm and true. The mountains rose higher as they neared the Apache village. The air grew sharper, filled with pine and stone, and the woman's heart pounded harder with every step. She clutched her cloak tighter around her shoulders, fear pressing against her ribs. The warrior walked ahead, tall and sure, yet even he knew what awaited. His people were proud, suspicious of outsiders, hardened by years of bloodshed and betrayal. To bring a pale-skinned woman carrying another man's child into their camp would not go unquestioned. As they entered the village clearing, the whispers began. Faces turned, eyes narrowed. The elders stepped forward, their gazes sharp as eagle talons. One spoke first, his voice low but cutting. "Why have you brought her here, Greyhawk? She is not of us, and she carries a child that is not yours." The woman froze, shame flooding her cheeks. She lowered her eyes, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. Every word confirmed her deepest fear, that she was nothing but a burden, an unwelcome shadow. But the warrior did not waver. He stepped forward, his calm eyes scanning the elders, his voice deep and steady. "She is under my protection. And what is under my protection is sacred. Her child is sacred." A murmur spread through the gathered villagers. One of the younger braves spat at the ground. "Sacred? You would claim another man's blood as your own. What honor is that?" The woman's chest tightened. Her hands shook. This was the moment she had dreaded, that he would finally falter under the weight of their judgment. But when she dared to lift her gaze, she saw no fear in his eyes. Greyhawk stood taller, his voice carrying across the gathering. "Honor is not in blood. Honor is in choice. This woman spoke her truth to me. She wept, but she did not lie. She carries life, and I will stand beside her. If you call me dishonorable for protecting the weak, then so be it. But I will not turn her away." The clearing fell silent, every ear straining on his words. One of the elders frowned deeply, his wrinkled face carved with disapproval. "Greyhawk, you are one of our strongest warriors. Your loyalty belongs to your people. Would you divide it for her? For a child that is not of our blood?" The warrior's jaw tightened. He placed his hand over his chest, his voice unwavering. "My loyalty is not divided. It is multiplied. To protect her is to strengthen myself. To protect her child is to prove that our people do not fear what is different. If we cannot honor life, any life, then what are we?" The woman's throat closed as tears filled her eyes. She had expected anger, even rejection. Yet here he stood, not bending, not breaking, but holding her higher than she had ever dared to hold herself. The murmurs grew louder, some approving, some resentful. One elder lifted his hand for silence. His eyes lingered on the woman, then shifted back to Greyhawk. "You have made your choice," the elder said gravely. "Know that it will not be easy. Some will resist. Some will challenge. But if you are willing to bear that burden, then we will not cast her out." Relief struck her like a wave, and her knees nearly buckled. She covered her mouth, her tears spilling freely. Greyhawk inclined his head respectfully, though his eyes stayed calm, his expression unreadable. "I will bear it," he said simply, and in that moment she realized that his oath was no fragile promise. It was a shield stronger than any blade, forged not of obligation, but of choice. The test had come, and he had not faltered. That night the village was restless. The woman felt it in the way eyes lingered too long when she passed, in the whispers that followed her steps. Even within the small lodge Greyhawk had prepared for her, she sensed the weight of doubt pressing in from every corner of the camp. She sat near the fire pit, arms wrapped protectively around her middle. Though her body showed no outward sign of the child yet, her heart carried the heaviness of it, of being different, of being judged. Her thoughts spun wildly. They will never accept me. They will never accept this child. Perhaps I should leave before I cause him more pain. The flap of the lodge rustled, and Greyhawk entered. He carried a bundle of firewood in one arm and set it down beside the pit. When he looked at her, his calm gaze softened, as though he could read the fear etched into her face. "You have not eaten," he said simply. She shook her head. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "How can I eat, when every whisper outside tells me I am not wanted here? I have brought you nothing but trouble. Already your people question you. Perhaps it would be better if I left." His steps were deliberate as he crossed the lodge and knelt beside her. The fire crackled between them, casting shadows across his strong, steady features. "You think leaving will silence their doubts?" he asked. Tears stung her eyes. "It would spare you their scorn." Greyhawk shook his head slowly. "No, their scorn is not your burden, it is mine to face. Do not take blame that is not yours." Her lips trembled. She looked at him desperately. "But what if they never accept me? What if they never accept the child? I cannot bear to see you torn between me and your people." He leaned forward, his voice low, but each word carried the weight of an unshakable vow. "Listen to me. You are not alone. Their fear does not decide your worth. Their whispers do not define your child. You fear being cast aside, but I will not cast you aside. That is truth." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I want to believe you. I do. But my heart is so full of fear." Greyhawk's calm never wavered. He reached out not to force her hands away, but to rest his palm gently against the ground beside her knee, a gesture of presence without intrusion. His dark eyes, steady as the mountains outside, held hers when she finally dared to lower her hands. "Then let my faith carry you," he said quietly, "until yours returns. That is why I walk with you. That is why I stay." Her breath caught. Something in his words, his unshaken certainty, broke through the walls she had built around her heart. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, but they were not the same bitter tears of shame she had shed before. These were different, softer, touched by the fragile light of hope. She whispered, her voice trembling, "No one has ever spoken to me this way. No one has ever seen me as more than what I have lost." Greyhawk's gaze did not falter. "That is because they looked with shallow eyes. I do not." The firelight flickered between them, warming the silence that followed. For the first time in many months, she felt the storm inside her heart, quiet, not gone, not healed, but gentled by his unwavering presence. Her fear had not vanished. But in the strength of his faith, she found a place to rest. The days that followed moved with a deceptive calm. The sun rose over the desert ridges, casting long golden light over the village, and the people went about their tasks, mending, hunting, tending fires. Yet beneath that calm, an unease rippled, unspoken but ever present. The woman felt it first in the way the warriors sharpened their blades with greater frequency, in the way voices dropped when she passed. Greyhawk, though steady as always, spent longer hours beyond the lodge, speaking with the elders and scouting the ridges. When he returned, his shoulders carried the weight of storms yet to come. One evening, as the shadows stretched long across the earth, she found him standing on a rise overlooking the valley. His figure was etched in the twilight, tall and resolute, as though carved into the very landscape. "Greyhawk," she called softly, approaching. "Why do you stand here alone?" He turned, his expression calm, yet his eyes carried a gravity that made her chest tighten. "Riders have been seen," he said. Soldiers. They move closer each day. Her heart stumbled. Soldiers? She knew too well the meaning of that word, the same men who had abandoned her, who saw her only as fragile possession or burden. The child within her stirred as if sensing her fear. Greyhawk's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. They come to push us farther from this land. They will not care for you, nor for your child. To them we are all enemies. The weight of it crushed her. She stepped closer, clutching his arm as though it were the only solid thing in the world. Then you must send me away, she said urgently. I will only bring more danger to you, to your people. But Greyhawk did not move. His dark eyes locked with hers, calm and immovable. You still do not understand, do you? He asked, voice low but firm. Your presence is not a burden, it is a bond. You and the child you carry are no longer apart from us. You are under my protection, and I will not abandon you. Her throat tightened with unshed tears. But what if they come here? What if they harm you because of me? A silence hung between them, heavy with the scent of sage carried on the wind. Then Greyhawk spoke, his voice like the steady beat of a drum. If they come, I will stand before them. If they strike, they will strike me first. That is the way of my people. That is the way of my heart. Something inside her broke and mended at once. She saw not only his strength, but his quiet certainty, his refusal to let fear dictate his path. And though terror still clutched at her chest, she felt a flame kindle in the ashes of her despair, a fragile flame of courage, borrowed from his faith. Below them, the valley stretched wide, bathed in the deepening hues of dusk. She leaned against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath, and whispered, Then I will not run. If the shadow of war comes, I will face it beside you. Greyhawk's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. He pressed his lips briefly to her hair, a gesture wordless yet full of promise. The shadow may fall, he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. But even in shadow, fire can burn. We will endure. And in that moment, though the world trembled with the threat of war, she believed him. The night was still, yet heavy with the weight of what might come. In the lodge the woman lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of drums echoing somewhere in the distance. Her hand rested over her belly, where the faintest stirrings of new life reminded her of everything at stake. Fear whispered in her ear, fear of the soldiers, of the tribe's judgment, of being cast aside when she most needed strength. The tears welled up before she could stop them. At last, unable to bear the silence, she turned toward Greyhawk, who sat by the fire, sharpening the edge of his blade with slow, deliberate motions. Her voice broke as she spoke. I cannot keep this secret inside me. I must say it again, though I know it wounds you. This child, it is not yours. The words trembled into the air like a confession of guilt, her chest heaving with shame. She expected his shoulders to stiffen, his calm to finally break. She expected anger or distance, or perhaps the quiet withdrawal of a man who could no longer bear her truth. But Greyhawk did not move with rage or rejection. He set the blade aside and turned to her. His eyes, deep and steady, met hers across the glow of the fire. I know, he said simply. His voice was calm, unshaken, like water that cannot be stirred by mere wind. Her breath caught. You know. And still, you stay? He rose then, slow and sure, and came to her side. Kneeling before her, he took her trembling hands in his. His touch was warm, grounding her as though she were a tree threatened by storm. A child is never a burden to a true man's heart, he said softly. Blood may tell where it comes from, but not where it belongs. If you will let me, I will be father to this child. I will be the ground beneath your feet when you cannot stand. Her tears fell freely now, spilling over her cheeks. She shook her head in disbelief, yet her heart surged with a fragile hope she had never known before. How can you be so calm when I have given you nothing but sorrow? How can your eyes still look at me with faith? Greyhawk lifted one hand, brushing away her tears with a gentleness that stole her breath. Because sorrow does not erase worth, and because love is not possession, it is choice. I choose you, and the child you carry. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire. In that silence, she felt something change inside her. The shame that had bound her loosened its grip, and the fear that had haunted her began to fade in the light of his truth. She pressed her forehead to his, her sobs quieting into whispers. Then I will not fear tomorrow. Not if I have you. Greyhawk's calm eyes closed briefly, his breath warm against hers. You have me, always. Outside the night remained dark, the threat of war still looming. But within the small circle of firelight, she felt a peace deeper than anything she had known. For the first time since her world had shattered, she was not alone, and those shadows pressed against the horizon, his calm, unwavering love gave her the courage to believe they could walk into that darkness together and emerge. Still standing, still whole, still bound by a faith that no fear could break.